and up and running again. I don't know what it is that keeps interfering, but it has happened the last two times I've done this as an event first. So I'm thinking maybe if I just avoid streaming as an event, uh, maybe that'll do it. I don't know what has been going on, but it's my internet. It just keeps going down for no apparent reason that I can figure out, and then it'll cycle through and it'll pop back up, and I don't know. I don't really like Xfinity. I'd say that much. All right, I'm gonna try and invite Trisha back on. Okay, sending the link. And hopefully we can get started momentarily back again. So sorry about that. We'll go ahead and rewind a little bit because I have no idea when it conked out on everybody. So we'll just go back a few, like a couple minutes probably. I think that'd be a good idea. All right, we'll go back that far. See if Trisha can rejoin. And I had a perfect connection until the point that it completely bottomed out. So, who knows? Hello, James. Hey, yeah, well, I mean that's capitalist realism for you. Um, I mean the reason that I end my streams when I do and don't go later, even though I tend to get more people past 9 o'clock my time, is that I got to get up in the morning for my job. So I am beholden to those forces as well. Unfortunately, I wish I could spend more time streaming. I wish I could spend every day at least doing a stream. Be a lot more fun. Even though I'm up to 4 days a week now when my internet's working. I mean, we got a good hour in this time too before it crapped out. So who knows? Who knows what's happened? Let's see. So I think Trisha's gonna try and rejoin here. Hey, Natalie. Glad you're back. Thank you all for bearing with me. No idea what happened. Oh, and now I get the the live notice again. Jeez. Hopefully the title's showing up right this time. I had to edit the title again. So it reverted back to my last one. Yep. I hear Trisha connecting. I don't see her yet. There we go. Hello again.
Hi.
Man, I have no idea what happened. It just I had perfect, 10-point connection there, and then it just was gone.
Yeah, it just
And
blew you out completely, and it's just like, uh, shit, what happened?
uh technology.
Right, right. Yeah, John was saying like it could be one of those things because they're developing AI programs that could have an algorithm specifically just looking for keywords that are part of the conversation of dissent against the current system
I
and
suppose that's
slowing
true.
down the bandwidth.
I suppose that's true, but I mean, for one thing, I'm a pretty low level streamer. Like, um, I'm lucky to have double digits of people in here watching me at any given time. And then another thing, I would think that it would affect a lot more of like LeftTube and other streamers who are doing this like all the time and talking about similar things. But I guess you never know.
If
So
if it's just a software thing, it would be hitting big and small alike.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know.
But the last this time and then the last time were both times that I had created an event beforehand. So maybe there's some trouble with restreams events. So I think I'll just avoid that for now in future streams and hope that that problem solves itself. Um, but yeah, and
Yeah.
hopefully you and Amanda tomorrow night don't have any trouble because you know I like what you guys are doing and glad to see you all continuing on with it. I hope it doesn't have any troubles like this.
Right? Same. And James, that's funny. No, we really hadn't gotten into any
No,
individual rich douchebags
not
as
yet.
not yet.
Although,
Yeah.
you know, now that
Right.
Elon is making his move to be the controller of Twitter, I wouldn't be surprised if that sort of thing starts happening, where
Right.
just somehow his bad mentions just disappear on the web.
Right. It's one of those things that makes me call bullshit because, when a guy is self-proclaiming as, such a defender of the First Amendment, yet perpetually blocks anybody who even tries to engage in debate with him.
Right.
Kind of
Yeah.
don't tend to trust him, to not block a bunch of people on Twitter just for, calling him out for, I don't know, anything from his family becoming wealthy at the expense of, literally millions of people throughout South Africa that they've exploited for fucking generations, having them work in their mines, to all the people who are working at Tesla now and not actually getting the full value of their labor either. He
Absolutely.
needs to give billions in reparations to South Africa before he can say any fucking thing
Yeah,
about
right.
practices. Just
In, in,
saying.
Instead, he's slapping billions down to buy a social media service because he doesn't like when people are mean to him. I mean, that just
Yeah.
shows you there's no such thing as an actual, Marvel sort of superhero in this world. Otherwise, what are all these billionaires doing with their time? How come they're a Batman or Tony Stark is not actually arisen to just benevolently save the world from catastrophe?
Right. Right. That's the thing. That's why those are made up stories. Those are fantasy.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Reality tells us different. Billionaires are not out here doing altruistic shit with their
Nope.
money. They're too busy buying bigger boats and demanding that bridges be taken down so they have ocean access.
Oh,
Like,
that was the worst. It's like, oops, I built my boat too big. Like, what? Why didn't you build a smaller boat then? Why didn't you
right,
build it in another place? Like,
right. That he could have built it anywhere.
right?
Um, and yes, John, this is live. We're back. But
Yes, we are
yeah,
back. Hello,
like
John.
just the sheer audacity of Bezos to demand that a historic monument bridge at that be taken the fuck down so his boat can pass through. It's like,
Oh,
guy, turn the fuck
oh,
around, go back to wherever you found that audacity and put it the fuck back. Put it back.
yeah, yeah.
Put it
That's right.
back. Fucking guys. uh,
Uh,
and everybody's still waiting for a Batman to happen. It's like, don't hold your breath.
and don't hold your breath. And Batman spent most of his time just like beating up the lumpen proletariat anyway. It's not like he had billions of dollars, even fictional Batman. Billions of dollars could have done wonders ending he could have wiped out homelessness in Gotham City like probably 4 or 5 times
Like that.
over
Yeah.
just with the snap of his fingers. But oh no, he'd rather go beat up guys who have resorted to a life of crime because of capitalism essentially.
Right. Right. It's like seriously, my favorite anti-hero ever is Bane. Cause
Yeah,
dude's got
right?
hella political analysis and
That's
he ain't
right.
wrong. I can't be mad at him for the shit he
Right.
does.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm like, well, he's a fucking revolutionary. Um
Yeah, like in that most recent Batman movie that he was in, like I'm like, why did they make this guy the bad guy? Like, okay, so yeah, so he's also murdering people and that's terrible and stuff, but like why are they making him say all these political things that are clearly not wrong?
right,
It's kind of
right.
funny.
And it's like it kind of makes you wonder who here is really the good guy and who is the
Yeah.
bad guy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also so much for, woke Hollywood, always trying to push their leftist agenda and whatnot. No, of course not. Of course not. That movie
Right.
made millions of dollars, and that's why they did it that way. They
Yeah,
they
pretty
will
much.
they will push any narrative as long as it makes them money.
And especially when they're painting the bad guy as having, actual leftist thought,
Right.
not American left, which is
Yeah,
centralized,
yeah. It's
you
got
know.
its flavoring. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know the radical idea that you're entitled to housing and food and healthcare basics for survival.
Right.
We're going to demonize that guy. He's the bad guy. We got to send a billionaire to kick his ass or try.
Yeah.
Like what the
Uh,
fuck?
right.
Oh goodness.
Okay. Well, let's get back into the chapter. I rewound it a few minutes because I'm not quite sure where it cut out. So if
Okay.
it's review, sorry guys, but this episode's going to be in two pieces anyway. So sorry, but that's just the reality of tonight.
Of natural soil quality and climate. To a very considerable extent, man now makes his own soil and his own climate, thanks to the achievements of chemistry. Exotic fruits can be raised in the north to be supplied to the warm south, as is being done in France.
And I'll just add there too. It's not as though we have to do, you know, really complicated plant breeding in order to get fruits and vegetables from exotic places to grow up here. I mean, we can rely on some pretty easy passive solar technology, like the greenhouse, to get that same sort of thing. So all we need is enough of that in a given area, and we can still supply all the same sort of thing without a fraction of the transportation fuel necessary. So
Right. Right. It's a lot cheaper to, set up greenhouses and be able to grow that stuff locally than to ship it.
absolutely, absolutely. So new technology is great, but it's more about appropriate technology. I always like to look at what's appropriate for the situation, not always what's the most energy intensive or the most like complicated scientifically. Those might be fine things in certain situations, but a lot of times it can take just very simple solutions, simple technologies to produce the same sort of thing without having to then go back and sacrifice a whole bunch of human labor to achieve the same thing either. So,
Right.
yeah, we can work smarter and not necessarily harder.
Right. We can, I don't know, look at things like Gene Roddenberry's examples laid out in the entirety of Star Trek, all of its series, where uh, everything is automated and
Hmm.
therefore provided, where everyone has housing, food, clothing, education, all of that. This is a loose quote, not verbatim, but Jean Luc Picard had said that we work to better society,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
not
and
for
and
personal
ourselves. Uh-huh.
gain. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I mean that just shows it. It's just their society is portrayed as being basically because of post scarcity. They have the replicator machine; it can make anything they want, and they also have infinite energy with their dilithium. It was dilithium crystals. Was that Star Trek? Something like that.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, they have unlimited energy and no waste. They can just produce whatever they need. So it's a completely post scarcity sort of society.
Right.
It's kind of funny that just led to basically a communist sort of society where people didn't fight as much about hierarchy and whatever because people's needs were just met, and so everyone just kind of oh, let's go explore the universe now. That sounds like a fun idea, and they just did it.
Right. It's a matter
But
of
the
making use of every bit of resources that you have, including. I don't know if you've seen Discovery, which is one of the newer series from the Star Trek line. But in the most recent season, there was a scene where this capitalist from the Emerald Ring had approached the uh, you know commander that was aboard the ship there. They were trying to set up some trade,
mm,
and um, it, he was showing her some stuff, like having her try some of the food from the replicant, and gave her an apple to try, and she tasted it and she was like, well, not quite exactly the same as, like
Hmm.
an actual grown apple, but that's pretty good. And he was like, yeah, it's not bad for shit, huh? They literally taking everybody's shit and like sterilizing it, stripping it down to its base nutrients, and putting those into the replicators
There you
to
go.
reorganize into the food that you want it to make. And they also
Perfect
refused to
system.
do business with her until she was held accountable for her crimes as a capitalist and exploiting people's labor. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, pretty
That's really cool.
badass. I love Discovery. I highly recommend it.
I haven't gotten into that one yet. Which service is that on? Is it's streaming on like Hulu or something? Or
I'm not really
I'll
sure
look it up.
because
That's
the
fine.
the service that I have has access to Netflix and Hulu and a few others.
Oh, okay,
So
cool.
it could be either of those.
Yeah, I'll look it up.
I don't know. Okay.
Um, but yeah, but in that sort of post scarcity society, the funny thing is though is that we basically live in a post scarcity society. We make way more than we ever use of everything that people need to survive: housing, food, and education, medicine. We could have all these things, but we just choose instead to have a capitalist system where only a few get to have it. Because what economic system you have is how things are distributed and how fairly they are distributed. Um, so the vision of Star Trek, this like far off, hundreds of years in the future thing, we could just have that today. And the same thing is true of like the replicator sort of a thing, where we can just take all of our waste. We don't have to produce tons of plastic that never breaks down. We can make biodegradable plastics today. We can make reusable containers for single use things. Um, we can just change the way we do stuff so that we're not as focused on single use. We can do all this stuff in Star Trek aside from easily going to the stars. But the way that their society is structured, we could have that today if we just chose to do it.
It's kind of funny, and a lot of the stuff seems really prophetic, and just makes me wonder if Gene Roddenberry was a fucking time traveler. But I will tell you this: the post scarcity came about after a third world war that started in 2024, so we're almost there on the Gene Roddenberry timeline.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. There's that one in that one event in Deep Space Nine where they went back to the 21st century. It was like the Bell riots. Was that what it was called? I don't know if you know DS9 as well, but
Uh, yes, but it's been years, so I can't quite remember Swiss cheese memory.
yeah,
But
I should try
we
and
should.
cover that episode sometime. And we won't be able to show the episode itself because I'm sure they have tons of copyright restrictions. But basically,
Sure.
the idea was um, the poor just had enough worldwide, and they rose up, and from that point on, there was worldwide communism, and that's how they got to the point where they could, launch um, the first voyages into space and stuff like that.
Yep.
First Star
It
Trek.
was it was when other life forms finally deemed humans worthy of making first contact with.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
You guys aren't.
oh,
You
you're
guys
not
aren't.
just killing each other off for
That's right.
resources now. Now we'll
That's
let you
right.
know the rest of us exist. You
Yeah.
found some ethics.
Actually, acting like mature, caring adults. Wow. Okay. All right. We'll let you in the club then.
Right, right. It's like
Uh,
fuck.
oh,
Swear.
James made a comment a little bit ago that I wanted to highlight before we go too
Absolutely.
far on. I just thought this was funny. I predict the future of Elon, uh, Buddy, and my pillow guy running against the Terminator and Oprah.
Oh God. Oh God.
I mean, I
That would
don't
be
think we're that far off. I know Mike Pillow, which I'm embarrassed to say is from my state. In fact, I used to deliver to his one of his warehouses when I was a delivery driver. Ugh. But yeah, he's definitely got political aspirations. Although thankfully, people seem to have stopped listening to him for a while. But you never know when you got money and a lot of crazy opinions that some people listen to. I guess there's no limit to how high you can climb in the Republican Party.
right. It was one of those shocking moments. Like you would have thought that people would stop listening to him after he went on that fucking rant about left wing sluts and vaginal hallucinogens
Yes.
around
Oh, that
fucking
was
people
so
somehow to get
unhinged.
them to do January 6th. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, right.
Like, what in the fucking QAnon fucking shit are you on, guy? But then again, Marjorie Taylor Greene still has fans, and she talks about Jewish space lasers. And I'm like, my
Oh,
Jewish ass
jeez.
checked with the committee on Jewish space lasers, and I have it confirmed that we're not starting the California fires. Jesus fucking Christ!
It's
Like,
like
there's
there's no level of conspiracy that's too out there. They just cannot accept that like climate change causes more forest fires, and also shitty capitalist corporations like PG&E who don't maintain their power lines can cause forest fires. They don't accept that people can just be duped by their demagogue Trump into basically committing an insurrection. No, it has to be some grand conspiracy of all these different moving parts and secret cabals and shadowy institutions all coming together. It couldn't just be the simplest explanation. That would just be ridiculous.
well, I mean, telling the truth of like Trump fucking mind fucked everybody, manipulated everybody into doing this is nowhere near as fun as Antifa sluts with vaginal hallucinogens
Yeah,
fucking all
like
these fucking weirdos and
wow, like
convincing
what a
to
huge effort that would have to be to like
I
have enough people there to perform this seduction, to target enough of those guys who would be susceptible to that seduction, and then have it all go off without anyone ever talking about it again. And
right?
like,
It's like how excellent is the mind control going
I
on there?
know, it's
It
just
was
like,
like an orgy thing in order to get them all on the same page at the same time. I want to know, pillow guy.
yeah, right. Oh, Mike Pillow.
Being an Antifa slut, I'd like to know where the fuck was my invitation.
Yeah, right. Like I'm still waiting on my Soros check myself. So,
Right? Same. Come on, George. We still ain't been paid for
uh,
Occupy. You're fucking late on your payments.
oh, you guys are wondering why you're not seeing each other's posts on Facebook? It's because some of you guys are on the Bread Theory page and some are on Left Signal Boost TV page. And for whatever reason, I have Restream bot on, so it's supposed to relay all these comments to all the different places I stream every time, but it doesn't work for Facebook for some reason. So sorry, but you'll just have to use the that's one reason I use this chat scroller on the side here, is because no matter where you comment, you'll be able to see it eventually. But that's the reason you're not able to see each other's comments in real time. You have to wait till it comes up on the page. But let's see. Oh, it's 8:21. I'm not sure that we're gonna finish this chapter, but we'll give it our best shot. But let's continue on here.
Absolutely.
Science is the wizard who enables man to master all difficulties and overcome all obstacles. The future, liberated from the incubus of the profit system and enriched by the work of those millions of non-producers today, holds the greatest welfare for society. That future must be the objective point of the social revolution. Its motto, bread and well-being for all. First bread, then well-being and luxury. Even luxury, for luxury is a deep-felt need of man, and a need of his physical as of his spiritual being. Intense application to this purpose must be the continuous effort of the revolution, not something to be postponed for a distant day, but of immediate practice. The revolution must strive to enable every community to sustain itself, to become materially independent. No country should have to rely on outside help or exploit colonies for its support.
That is absolutely true. Man, that point was drilled home when we were going through A People's History of the United States, first chapter on colonialization.
That I mean, the word exploit
It doesn't
it
even come
doesn't
close,
land hard enough.
right?
I mean, that was straight up fucking brutality. Extermination of an entire group of indigenous people, the Arawak.
Yep.
Um, within, what was it, like 12, 13 years? I forget. Something like that. That they went from a population of, hundreds of thousands to none.
Yeah. To zero. So like they couldn't find genetic links to any of those people anymore
Right.
from the original population. That's yeah.
Right.
And maybe not on that level, but exploitation still occurs around the world thanks to capitalism, because capitalism is like, it's like if you had the very hungry caterpillar but you just never stopped eating, and you just had to keep growing and growing and get hungrier and hungrier in order to sustain itself. That's capitalism. It always has to find some new market to exploit, more people to extract money out of, because it takes more and more people to support the rich every time, and the more wealthy they get, the more poor people below them they have to be able to take from. So eventually you run out of local people to stop to continue exploiting. You have to go find other people to exploit, and that's where colonialism is born.
Yep. I think that's a big part of why so many of them push the pro forced birth lines too, because they're like, no, we can't allow you to have
Oh,
agency
absolutely.
over your own body and choose to not carry a baby that could one day be another wage slave.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and that too, because again, not as much as it used to be when factory work was like the dominant form of industry, and like people were literally dying in the factory floors left and right because there was absolutely no rights. But even still today, you have to reproduce the working class, like physically have them reproduce in order to keep that engine moving and keep more dollars flowing upward. So yeah, that certainly is a big part of why the right loves people not having control of their bodies, because they don't want any workers to have control of their bodies. They want to literally own people. If they could reenact slavery, I'm sure there's a large portion of them that wouldn't think twice about it.
Oh, absolutely.
Um,
Because
and then,
they would just see dollar signs of, yeah, this benefits
yeah,
me. So
oh sure,
fuck those people. They weren't born wealthy. They don't matter.
yeah, and I'm sure they would justify it in every way. Oh, we'll give them housing. We'll give them a place to go to school for their kids. We'll give them all this stuff. They just have to sell their bodies to us for eternity. So, at least they get something out of it, though, right? It's kind of like the company town sort of mentality.
Yep. Yep.
But
Where you always owe the company store more than what your fucking check was.
same thing with sharecroppers. Um, Same thing with indentured servitude. A lot of people came to this country as indentured servants with the hopes of finally making a fresh start and being able to make it in a new land, only to find that once they were done being an indentured servant, they were left with nothing, or in debt, or, you know, physically incapable of doing work after that point. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
All right, let's continue on.
That is the way of capitalism. The aim of anarchism, on the contrary, is material independence, not only for the individual, but for every community. This means gradual decentralization instead of centralization. Even under capitalism, we see the decentralization tendency manifest itself in spite of the essentially centralistic character of the present-day industrial system. Countries which were before entirely dependent on foreign manufacture, as Germany in the last quarter of the 19th century, later in Italy and Japan, and now in Hungary, Czechoslovakia, etc., are gradually emancipating themselves industrially, working their own natural resources, building their own factories and mills, and attaining economic independence from other lands. International finance does not welcome this development and tries its utmost to retard its progress, because it is more profitable for the Morgans and Rockefellers to keep such countries as Mexico, China, India, Ireland, or Egypt industrially backward in order to exploit their natural resources. and at the same time be assured of the foreign markets for overproduction at home. The governments of the great financiers and the lords of industry help them secure those foreign natural resources and markets, even at the point of the bayonet. Thus, Great Britain, by force of arms, compels China to permit English opium to poison the Chinese at a good profit, and exploits every means to dispose in that country the greater part of its textile products. For the same reason, Egypt, India, Ireland, and other dependencies and colonies are not permitted to develop their home industries. In short, capitalism seeks centralization. But a free country needs decentralization, independence, not only political, but also industrial and economic. Russia strikingly illustrates how imperative economic independence is, particularly to the social revolution. For years following the October upheaval, the Bolshevik government concentrated its efforts on currying favor with bourgeois governments for, quote, recognition and inviting foreign capitalists to help exploit the resources of Russia. But capital, afraid to make large investments under the insecure conditions of the dictatorship, failed to respond with any degree of enthusiasm. Meanwhile, Russia was approaching economic breakdown. The situation finally compelled the Bolsheviki to understand that the country must depend upon her own efforts for maintenance. Russia began to look around for means to help herself, and thereby she acquired greater self-confidence in her own abilities, learned to exercise self-reliance and initiative, and started to develop her own industries, a slow and painful process, but a wholesome necessity which will ultimately make Russia economically self-supporting and independent. The social revolution in
Well, of course, we know the end of that tale, unfortunately. But, I mean, I would say that for a while that was close to reality in Soviet Russia. But then eventually the capitalists got their hooks in the elites there and kept pushing things towards capitalism. And eventually the Soviet Union broke apart.
Yep. It wasn't socialism failing there. It was capitalist influences fighting against it so hard, like, we can't allow this, it might spread. And
Yeah.
people here might want to own the means of their production too.
Hmm.
That's all that was. That was fucking
It's a
capitalist
big part of it.
insecurities.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And, and embargoes constantly and,
Hmm.
pushing them to join the nuclear arms race and the space race and all these other very expensive endeavors that also worked to drain Russia of its wealth. Or I shouldn't say Russia, it was the Soviet Union at the time.
Right.
But yeah, also led towards the breaking down of the state. Uh, yeah, it's very sad what we did. You're right, John. But yeah, it's we can't have any threats to capitalism worldwide. That's the supposed to be the lesson from the U.S. after all these decades. Any time we've seen any socialist uprising or revolution, it has been met with war, or proxy war, or coups, or sowing rebellion, supporting right wing death squads. You name it. The U.S. has pushed for the collapse of every country that does not toe the capitalist line.
Right. A lot of people are unaware that in like the 60s and 70s, Afghanistan was a socialist fucking utopia.
It
Okay,
did it,
women
yeah.
women had rights legally, you know, considered as people. Holy
Mm-hmm.
shit. Able to drive, dress however they want, go to college,
Yeah.
all this other stuff. Um, like, they were flourishing. And, the US had to go and fuck that up with creating and funding what was to become the Taliban and Al Qaeda.
Yeah, those brave mujahideen fighters that we were fighting or funding. That is,
Right. And then
there
ended
was
up
the,
making an enemy for ourselves a couple
Yeah.
decades later.
Oh, and pushing that country back hundreds and hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
Just to fight a proxy, just because we had to fight a proxy war with the Soviet Union, we couldn't allow them to have any influence in that area. Um, we were
And
afraid of the.
they very strongly did. You know, that's where a lot of the socialist influence came from. There, that Afghanistan, the people there grabbed a hold of it like, yes, this is fucking awesome. This is exactly what we need.
Hmm.
Is to have everyone have access to the necessities for life. And capitalism was like, oh fuck, we can't have that. We can't have it growing and spreading.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We had to be the one remaining power in the world. That's been the whole goal. All
Yep,
right, let's continue on.
Any given country
absolutely.
must from the very first determine to make itself self-supporting. It must help itself. This principle of self-help is not to be understood as a lack of solidarity with other lands. On the contrary, mutual aid and cooperation between countries, as among individuals, can exist only on the basis of equality among equals. Dependence is the very reverse of it. Should social revolution take place in several countries at the same time, in France and Germany, for instance, then joint effort would be a matter of course and would make the task of revolutionary reorganization much easier. Fortunately, the workers are learning to understand that their cause is international. The organization of labor is now developing beyond national boundaries. It is hoped that the time is not far away when the entire proletariat of Europe may combine in a general strike, which is to be the prelude to the social revolution. That is emphatically a consummation to be striven for with the greatest earnestness. But at the same time, the probability is not to be discounted that the revolution may break out in one country sooner than another. Let us say in France earlier than in Germany. And in such a case, it would become imperative for France not to wait for possible aid from outside, but to immediately exert her energies to help herself to supply the most essential needs of her people by her own efforts. Every country in revolution must seek to achieve agricultural independence, no less than political. Industrial self-help, no less than agricultural. This process is going on to a certain extent even under capitalism. It should be one of the main objects of the social revolution. Modern methods make it possible. The manufacture of watches and clocks, for example, was formerly a monopoly of Switzerland and is now being carried on in every country. Production of silk, previously limited to France, is among the greatest industries of various countries today. Italy, without sources of coal or iron, constructs steel-clad ships. Switzerland, no richer, also makes them. Decentralization will cure society of many evils of the centralized principle. Politically, decentralization means freedom. Industrially, material independence. It implies security and well-being for small communities. Individually, it results in manhood and liberty. Equally important to the social revolution, as in independence from foreign lands, is decentralization within the country itself. Internal decentralization means making the larger regions, even every community, so far as possible, self-supporting. In his very illuminating and suggestive work, Fields, Factories, and Workshops, Peter Kropotkin has convincingly shown how a city like Paris, even now almost exclusively commercial, could raise enough food in its own environs to support its population abundantly. By using modern agricultural machinery and intensive cultivation, London and New York could subsist entirely upon the products raised in their own immediate vicinity.
I'm not sure what the populations were of these various places at the time that he was writing this, but I would wager to say that that's not really possible now. Even with modern technology, it would just take devoting way too much land to agricultural production rather than people's dwellings. But having said that, there's a whole lot more that we could do to produce even a little bit of the food that we eat and the things that we consume. Um, there's always a little bit more that we can squeeze into, abandoned city lots, the acres upon acres of lawn that is now just sitting there to be looked at, not even usually played upon or used in any way. There's a whole lot of opportunity for growing more food and being more abundant. We can add more, passive solar to building designs and then incorporate edible stuff into the landscaping and there's all sorts of things that we could do. I don't think we're ever going to get to the point where we're completely locally self-sufficient. We're always going to have to depend on the hinterlands, the farm country to some extent, which is okay.
Like if we were to look at the eastern seaboard itself, then okay, yeah, there's like even just in the state of New York, yeah, New York City has a massive population, but the rest of the state of New York is pretty damn huge and with pretty sparse population.
Absolutely.
Um, so like there's a lot of areas like that along the eastern seaboard, that areas that are now lawn or just empty fields stretching on forever could be used to grow food to supply the larger cities too. You know, but as far as like right in town, they'd have to really get down on a lot of urban gardening. I mean, everybody having their balconies and windows covered in, edible plants, things like that, which is, it's doable. We definitely need to encourage people to get more
Definitely do a
into
lot
this
more.
efficiency, you know.
And and
Um,
that and this is where permaculture principles can really come in key, because when you're not just having a whole lot of land to play around with, you need to be very deliberate about the choices that you make about food production, what sort of things you choose to grow, how much inputs they need to be sustained, how we can, better create uh, a functional ecosystem so that the various parts of it, nothing is getting out of control, everything is kept in a dynamic equilibrium. So I think permaculture principles can really come into play a lot. I'm gonna share a link right now um, that says that in the lower 48 states, according to, oh, this is a 2005 NASA estimate, so it's probably even more than now, but there were around 40 million acres of lawn, just grass, uh, 1.9% of the surface of the continental United States. Um, so this was, over 15 years ago. It's probably even more at this point, and just an interesting thing to contemplate what we could do with that land instead.
right, right. For
Oops,
fuck's sake,
that's not what I meant. So
could
here's the
homestead it and have family farms popping up every fucking where, and actually providing both housing and food. Why?
absolutely.
Like
Let's see.
it's one of those things we get to thank France for making it popular to have a grass lawn. Why? Who knows? Fucking bourgeoisie appeal there. The French started that one, and now it's like it's caught on to the point that there's even cities, towns, and all the way down to like neighborhood organizations that require you to have lawn, that you can't grow food in your front yard. It must be a fucking neatly maintained green grass lawn.
Yep.
It's
So
stupid.
it is stupid. It's stupid. It's a relic of the bourgeois trend to mimic the fancy lords of Europe because they could afford to set aside certain portions of their land to produce nothing, to just be something to look at. So it was like a conspicuous consumption of its time. We can take all of this land and not make food on it. We can afford to do this because we're so wealthy. And that's how the original idea of the lawn first caught on, and it just hasn't died since then, unfortunately. Here's another article I'm going to link, and it talks about how when you look at irrigated crops, so this does not include like feed corn or rangeland or other stuff that's just dependent on natural precipitation. But in terms of irrigated crops, lawn consumes more than the next 8 irrigated crops in the United States. There's more land for it than all of that stuff. Yeah, yeah.
It's so backwards. It's
Turf grass.
like,
Yeah.
what the fuck?
So in other words, turf grass, U.S.'s largest irrigated crop.
That's sad.
That's sad.
Sad.
That's sad.
We're not eating that shit. There's seldom few animals that'll eat that shit.
Yep. So keep in mind that 40 million acre number for lawns. So here's the next 4 irrigated crops: cotton, 4 million acres; pasture land, so irrigated pasture land at that, 3.6 million acres; wheat, 3.3 million acres; and non-alfalfa hay, 3.2 million acres. That's the next 4 irrigated crops.
It's fucking ridiculous.
And dwarfed by the size of lawns. So yeah. So overall, what Berkman is saying here, when he talks about being able to do more to produce for ourselves, absolutely true. Absolutely true. We could turn 100% of that lawn into usable land to grow food for human beings, which would also have the added benefit of easing the pressure on developing more and more, wild and semi-wild places into agricultural lands, because we're taking that pressure for production away, lowering the demand for crops overall, the more we produce close in.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Let's continue on.
It is a face that, quote, our means of obtaining from the soil whatever we wane, under any climate, and upon any soil, have lately been improved at such a rate that we cannot foresee yet what is the limit of productivity of a few acres of land. The limit vanishes in proportion to our better study of the subject, and every year makes it vanish further and further from our sight. End quote. When the social revolution begins in any land, its foreign commerce stops. The importation of raw materials and finished products is suspended. The country may even be blockaded by the bourgeois governments, as was the case with Russia.
Every time.
Thus, the revolution is compelled to become self-supporting and provide for its own wanes. Even various parts of the same country may have to face such an eventuality. They would have to produce what they need within their own area by their own efforts. Only decentralization could solve this problem. The country would have to reorganize its activities in such a manner as to be able to feed itself. It would have to revert to production on a small scale, to home industry, and to intensive agriculture and horticulture. Man's initiative, freed by the revolution, and his wits sharpened by necessity, will rise to the situation. It must therefore be clearly understood that it would be disastrous to the interests of the revolution to suppress or interfere with the small-scale industries which are now practiced to such a great extent in various European countries. Numerous articles of everyday use are produced by the peasants of continental Europe during their leisure winter hours. Those home manufactures total up tremendous figures to fill a great need. It would be most harmful to the revolution to destroy them, as did Russia so foolishly did in her mad Bolshevik passion for centralization. When a country in revolution is attacked by foreign governments, when it is blockaded and deprived of imports, when its large-scale industries threaten to break down, or the railroads actually do break down, then it is just the small home industries which become the vital nerve of economic life. They alone can feed and save the revolution. Moreover, such home industries are not only a potent economic factor, they are also of the greatest social value. They serve to cultivate friendly intercourse between the farm and the city, bringing the two into closer, more solidaric contact. In face, the home industries themselves are an expression of a most wholesome social spirit, which from the earliest times has manifested itself in village gatherings, in communal efforts, in folk dance and song. This normal and healthy tendency, in its various aspects, should be encouraged and stimulated by the revolution for the greater weal of the community. The role of industrial decentralization in the revolution is unfortunately too little appreciated. Even in progressive labor ranks, there is a dangerous tendency to ignore or minimize its importance. Most people still live in the thraldom of Marxian dogma that centralization is, quote, more efficient and economical. They close their eyes to the face that the alleged economy is achieved at the cost of the worker's life and limb, that the efficiency degrades him to a mere industrial cog, deadens his soul, and kills his body. Furthermore, in a system of centralization, the administration of industry becomes constantly merged in fewer hands, producing a powerful bureaucracy of industrial overlords. It would indeed be the sheerest irony if the revolution were to aim at such a result. It would mean the creation of a new master class. The revolution can accomplish the emancipation of labor only by gradual decentralization, by developing the individual worker into a more conscious and determining factor in the processes of industry, by making him the impulse whence the proceeds of all industrial and social activity. The deep significance of social revolution lies in the abolition of the mastery of man over man, putting in its place the management of things. Only thus can be achieved industrial and social freedom. Are you sure it would work, you demand? I am sure of this. If that will not work, nothing else will. The plan I have outlined is a free communism, a life of voluntary cooperation and equal sharing. There is no other way of securing economic equality which alone is liberty. Any other system must lead back to capitalism. It is likely, of course, that a country in social revolution may try various economic experiments. A limited capitalism might be introduced in one part of the land, or collectivism in another. But collectivism is only another form of the wage system, and would speedily tend to become capitalism of the present day. For collectivism begins by abolishing private ownership of the means of production, and immediately reverses itself by returning to the system of remuneration according to work performed, which means the reintroduction of inequality. Man learns by doing. The social revolution in different countries and regions will probably try out different methods, and by practical experience learn the best way. The revolution is at the same time the opportunity and justification for it. I am not attempting to prophesy what this or that country is going to do, what particular course it will follow, nor do I presume to dictate the future, to prescribe its mode of conduct. My purpose is to suggest in broad outline the principles which must animate the revolution, the general lines of action it should follow if it is to accomplish its aim, the reconstruction of society on a foundation of freedom and equality. We know that previous revolutions for the most part failed in their objectives. They degenerated into dictatorship and despotism, and thus re-established the old institutions of oppression and exploitation. We know it from past and recent history. We therefore draw the conclusion that the old way will not do. A new one must be tried in the coming social revolution. What new way? The only one that is known to man, the way of liberty and equality, the way of free communism, of anarchy.
This has been a production of Audible Anarchist. You can find more Audible Anarchist on YouTube.
Okay.
Score. We finished.
Yeah, we got through. I was afraid we weren't going to get quite this far, but there you have it. So yeah, he touched on a lot of stuff in that last couple of sections there. I can understand where he's coming from when he says things like, you know, if we do away with the class system, but then we still keep money and compensate people differently, that it can lead to a backslide into capitalism. I think there's some merit to that argument. I don't know that it's, you know, inevitable that sort of a thing would happen, that we couldn't just keep on progressing and progressing as more and more people become empowered just through the vast reduction of hierarchies that would come with a socialist, like a true socialist revolution. But yeah, I can see where he's coming from.
Right, there would have to be something put into place for checks and balances that, okay, if everyone working at this place is making X amount of dollars, that is, you know, like their full value of their labor. Well, if this other group of people at the next factory are also receiving the full value of their labor, but it's not equal to what is produced by this other factory,
Right.
we're going to have a difference there.
There's still going to be some imbalance. But I tend to think, though, if people at least have the platform of having their basic needs met, of having real choice in their life about where they put their labor towards, what they do with their time, like true freedom, you know, in the most, like, in as absolute a sense as one can have without starting to infringe on other people's freedoms, I would think that those little bit of differences between, you know, one factory versus another, or people having a little bit more than other people, wouldn't matter quite as much. For one thing, if people really have freedom and choice and stuff like that, they have the time and energy to then put into the political system. So assuming that we're making that system as egalitarian and free access as possible, then at least you have some recourse to pull on those levers and correct, you know, backsliding towards capitalist and accumulation of power and hoarding of resources and all that sort of thing. So John's making some good points here. First, he says we have lost our culture to capitalism, and that's true in many senses. For one thing, just the commodification of absolutely everything that is just the really pernicious habit of capitalism. It tends to like take a cultural thing, grind it down into like, you know, its most smooth and pleasing aspect, and then sending it out for a price. And because that thing then gets the most exposure and recognition, it becomes how people view that particular cultural artifact, or what. Football is another good example. So yeah, the idea of identifying so much with consumer culture, making your idea about a certain brand, like I'm a Chevy man, oh, I'm a Ford man, these ridiculous things, they hollow out what otherwise would be people's robust and vibrant cultural practices that would just naturally arise and form.
Right. Like, honestly, that has to be expanded on just a little bit to make that word culture plural, because this is the melting pot.
Yeah,
We've lost many cultures, just even in the
absolutely.
United States,
Oh, for
to
sure.
capitalism.
Yep.
All they became was a means for somebody to profit off of
Yep.
without benefiting those it came from.
Even just like the dominance of a particular language like English, you lose different ways of thinking. People don't really maybe even understand that or think about that, but thinking in different languages is not just substituting this word for that word and that word for that word, and then you have a different language. It's entirely different ways of thinking. different
Right.
different parts of that culture are baked into the language. It's like one of the way that my one of my ethnic studies professors would always put it is that culture is a three-legged stool. It's language, land, and life ways. And if you think about sitting on a stool, if you kick out one of those legs, it's going to be a lot less stable. It can still hold up with two legs. When you get down to one leg, you're really risking teetering over. And of course, no legs. That's the end of that culture entirely. But language is one of that really important pillars of any culture. So when you start making English only education, make all legal documents in English, and just the cultural like fire hose that we spray on the rest of the world with our art and our music and all this stuff, it has an effect on eroding other people's cultures.
Really does. And one of the most simple things that comes to mind there from your comparison is even the translation into Spanish of thank you being gracias, and the straight translation of you're welcome being de nada, but de nada really means it's nothing.
It's
Isn't it's
nothing.
okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to thank me for that because
Right.
I'm doing what I should and doing right by you. So it comes across as this arrogant, well, you're welcome, when it's really no, no worries, you
No
know.
problem. Of course, it is. It's expected. This is how I treat other people. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good point. It's. I mean, and there's plenty of other examples like that. Like adios. People translate it as goodbye, but literally it's with God.
Later.
Adios. Dios is God.
Go with
So
God.
it's
Yep.
it's go with God. So there's a cultural component that's not really translated by just calling it, just saying it's goodbye. Sure, it's a farewell greeting, but there's more
Right.
to it than that. So,
Right. They're literally wishing you well on your path that you're about to
hmm,
embark on until the next time you see each other.
absolutely.
Parting with a
And that,
blessing.
and every time we lose a culture, we lose a what could be a valuable perspective. Maybe it could be that one culture could see a particular problem in a way that no other culture would even recognize. We benefit by having multiple sets of eyes on any given problem and also multiple ways of thinking. So throwing everything into one homogenous sort of, you're Americans now, you have to have American culture and speak American and all these sorts of things. We lose a lot. We
It's
lose a
like,
lot by that.
the fuck even is American culture besides consumerism?
Well, exactly.
There
Exactly.
isn't one. There's a million other cultures that, people from those cultures have landed here, thus making this melting pot. But the only thing truly American about, okay, this is Turtle Island. America itself is a fucking colonizer name given by Europe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the only thing American is that fucking consumerism from the fucking start.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Consume, exploit, sell off, destroy, wash, rinse, repeat.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the more that the idea of American culture is pushed to our heads, the more it leads to more nationalistic tendencies. And nationalism is only a hop, skip, and a jump from ethno-nationalism.
Yeah.
They end up just blending together at some point. Like you stop pretending that one is separate from the other.
It's
So
Why so
Yeah,
many Nazi groups call themselves nationalists? They are
that's right.
ethno-nationalists.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Um,
Oh,
you're right, James. Though speaking English is different than speaking American English. There's many forms of English. There's many dialects of English, even within the United States or Australia or any number of Canada. You know, so every language is going to be shaped and formed by the people and their cultural traditions and stuff like that. So
right.
that's that's actually a good thing. It's a good thing that people reinterpret stuff continuously. It keeps refreshing um, different cultural aspects of various overlapping peoples. Um, so so yeah, we should celebrate that sort of thing. Instead of making fun of everyone who speaks with a different accent or has a different vernacular that they use. These are interesting things. These are legitimate things that are cultural developments. Different.
Hmm.
It's the branching out of culture rather than the lopping off of all the different cultural limbs into one dying trunk. Um,
Right. Kind of makes me think of the beautiful eloquence that the Scottish have put on the English language when it comes to the insults and like calling people shit like
yeah,
cockwombles and ball bags. I love it.
absolutely. Yeah, that sort of thing should be celebrated.
Yes.
Um, But then, there's that tendency too to like, I mean, even in Minnesota, like, I don't think I speak with a very Minnesotan accent. I guess all of you who are from other places, you might be able to correct me on that. But you just growing up, you would make fun of the kid who was like, oh yeah, oh yeah, the really long Midwestern draw. These were seen as like hicks or hayseeds or you know, uh,
People who pronounce
there was prejudice.
Minnesota.
Yeah, Minnesota. Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. Basically,
Yeah, no,
southern Canada.
you sound like normal Midwesterner to me. I'm from
Exactly.
Michigan. I mean, most of us there we speak ghetto Billy. But I do have a few friends who have moved from there to Minnesota and come back going, "Holy shit! You should hear the way people talk there with
That's some
Minnesota."
people. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah,
But
people like Jesse Ventura really they lean into that accent as much as they possibly can. And growing up, it's not something you really think about. So you make fun of things because they're different. Because what do you know? You're a dumb kid. But really, we should be celebrating these differences in the way of saying things. It's interesting. It's one of the things that makes life continuously interesting. Is you say things really different. Um, like Minnesota, we're the only state in the entire country that we don't play duck duck goose. All you other people, you play duck duck goose. We play duck duck gray duck, and as far as I know, we're the only ones that do that.
I've never
Um,
heard of that.
exactly, and isn't that interesting though? It's like then you start thinking, why did that come about? And you do a little research, and the story, I don't know how true it is, how apocryphal it is, but the story is that it really originally came from Sweden. There's a bunch of Swedes that migrated to Minnesota because they're like, oh, it's not cold enough anywhere else. We got to go to a really really rugged cold place. So they ended up
Right.
in Minnesota, and they originally called it, I think it was Anka Anka Grease, which means duck duck gray. So that's where we got it from. But then somehow it morphed into duck duck goose everywhere else except for Minnesota. But that's just one of those little things that you know I think it's
Intriguing.
cool.
I'd never heard of
Um,
that before. No fucking clue.
yeah,
I dig it. I dig
yeah.
it.
I'm sure there are things about Michigan or Arizona that maybe you've heard that you just don't hear anywhere else, and it kind of makes you go, But
The only one really coming to mind is more than just Michigan. It's a Midwest thing of the ope. Oh,
oh,
let me just drink
I,
past you. Oh, let me squeeze
yeah,
here. it's
yep,
it's
and
literally apologizing for existing and taking up space.
yeah, that's right.
It's so ridiculous. Like, oh, excuse me.
Oh, yep,
And
and
it
that is
just
so
comes out.
Midwest. And I grew up saying it, and I didn't notice it until I was an adult, and people started like pointing it out and stuff. But yeah, I say "oh" all the time. Oh, 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 excuse me. But yeah, that's a Midwest thing. And
Mhm.
where did that come from? How did that term come about? These are interesting things, and these are things that we should be celebrating. And holding on to.
Right. Right. It's unique craziness,
Yep.
has its own localities, and it's humorous. I mean,
Yeah.
it's great to see these differences. You know, that's something I
Absolutely.
wish more people like found an appreciation for differences
Absolutely.
instead of being like, "Oh, I don't like them because of this difference." Like, come on now.
Yep. But there's definitely a capitalist influence in all of that that just kind of pushes everyone towards one thing so that they're easier to market to. So they fit more easily into business culture. So they can more easily be told what to do in the factory if we all have the same imposed set of values and ways of talking and, you know, vocabulary, on and on. It really serves capitalism, and then you can market to them in one. You can put out one ad read, like that goddamn Empire blinds and flooring that they do the 100,888 Empire, yeah, across the
Yeah.
country, and it's because it's in that kind of dull Midwestern tone and accent that they can just do one ad read then and put it out across the entire country. You don't have to worry about different values or ways of inflection or anything getting in the way of that message. You can just do it. So I think there really is a capitalist influence in pushing everything towards one homogenous culture.
Mm-hmm. Treating us like milk to be processed. Like, we gotta homogenize this, motherfuckers.
Yeah, that's right. We are not milk. We are
Right?
people.
They're people. God damn it.
Well, I have gone over my time tonight, so we should probably wrap things up. I had a lot of fun talking with you again, Trisha. It's been
Same.
a pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you
Did you
for having me.
Yeah, did you have any other parting thoughts as we leave? We only got one chapter left next week, so that'll be it.
Um, yeah, not anything I can think of offhand,
Hey,
but
no problem.
we should probably start figuring out what book to do next, if we
Yeah,
don't already.
I think next I'm gonna focus more on kind of like one-off essays, so we can just go through a whole bunch of authors all at one after another, get a much broader base. We've kind of done the in-depth thing for over a year now, so I'm gonna try
Yeah,
and focus more on getting a little bit of Mao and a little bit of Bakunin and a little bit of this and that, Rosa Luxemburg. Do the short essays, because then also if other people want to join in, they don't have to feel like they got to catch up on 23 chapters of stuff before they're up to speed on what we're doing too. It's an easier way to get in and out and get it done.
right.
So
And well, we'll still be doing a focused deep dive on Mondays with the People's
exactly.
History of the United States too. So that'll be fun to mix it up and have
Yeah.
essays on Wednesdays.
Yeah,
Hell
and I'm
yeah.
sure there's going to be a lot of feeding back and forth between the stuff we learned on that one and the stuff that we're reading. It's all very relevant to one another.
I've already got a couple essays coming to mind that I will message you about after we get done with this.
Very cool.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Very cool. It's fun to see all the comments of people. Do you say buggy or shopping cart? I say shopping cart. I
I
didn't
think,
hear buggy until I met people from the south, though.
right? Same. Uh, and the tomato
Shopping
or
basket.
tomato. You say tomato, I say tomato. You say potato, I say potato.
Yeah, the weirdest part of that song that I remember is you say oysters and I say ersters. Who says
Yeah,
ersters? I've
right,
never heard anyone say that, but that's interesting.
right. It's kind of fun.
Benice. Natalie says, have you ever heard of the slang word benense, meaning because? Wow, that's so cool. And you were up in Illinois, right, Natalie? I wonder if that's an Illini thing.
I don't know. Could be.
Cool.
I've
Anyway,
never heard it either. And I'm from Michigan, not far from you.
yeah,
You know,
right, right. Huh.
strange,
Cool. I'm gonna have to look that up now. All right. Well,
right?
thank you again for joining me. Everyone in the chat, thanks for keeping the conversation going, keeping things so lively, and asking good questions, making good points. I always appreciate y'all being here. If you'd like to support the stream more, you can check me out on Patreon. You go to patreon.com/bread_theory, and you can support for just $5 a month. Help me do more of this stuff, because it's a lot of fun, and I love interacting with you all. And thank you, John, for being one of the patrons there. I do appreciate your support, and I'm trying to get more posts out too. So I've taken your advice on that. Anyway, tune in tomorrow night. You guys going probably 8 p.m. Eastern time again, you and Amanda?
So, yeah.
All right. So check out tomorrow night when things turn into head theory, and Trisha and my wife Amanda talk about mental health issues, and it was really illuminating. Really great conversation last time. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I can't wait to see what y'all come up with this week.
Well, this will be like a part 2 of that, a continuing of that.
Very cool.
Deep dive into incorporating the conversation on psychedelics with our mental health, because so many plant medicines are on this earth for us to be able to make use of and help deal with life on life's terms. And so we've got a lot more on that avenue to bring you guys' way tomorrow night.
Right on.
But looking forward to it. Should be interesting. And I would just like to give everybody in the comments a shout out. Thank you. You guys are all our diehards.
Oh yeah, you guys are awesome. I always enjoy y'all being around. All right. Well, with that, I will say goodbye to you, Trish, and yeah, have a good night. And just before we go, I do like to shout out members of the Left Signal Boost TV community. So tonight, I'm shouting out the Left in the Basement podcast. Really phenomenal podcast. They talk. They usually do interviews with just regular working class people and talk about leftist issues. And sometimes it's people that agree with them, sometimes it's not as much, but it's always a really interesting and productive conversation. So I highly recommend you checking out Left in the Basement, another proud member of the Left Signal Boost TV collective. All right, that's going to be it tonight, guys. Thanks.